The Mind of the Abyss, Abraham Lincoln's Hidden Secrets in Times of Crisis. The Dark Laboratory of Solitude. There's a little-known document Abraham Lincoln wrote during the Civil War, a piece of writing historians never included in the textbooks. Hidden in those pages was not a military plan, but a mental strategy, a framework that allowed him to remain sane while an entire nation collapsed around him. What he revealed in that document has the power to shatter everything you thought you knew about leadership and high performance. As a performance archaeologist, I've spent years digging through the hidden layers of history, searching for the raw moments behind the polished myths. And when I came across what Lincoln actually did in his darkest hours, it kept me awake for weeks. Most people still see him as the saintly president who saved the Union. That's not the full truth. The truth is far darker and infinitely more powerful. Lincoln faced something almost no modern leader has ever tasted: the abyss of absolute responsibility. Imagine waking up every single day knowing that every decision you make could determine the lives or deaths of thousands. Imagine leading a country where half the nation despises you, while the other half demands miracles you're not even sure you can deliver. Self-help gurus love to preach that leadership is all about confidence, charisma, and positivity. But that's a lie. Lincoln shows us something completely different. Real leadership begins with the brutal acceptance of your own inadequacy. In that secret document, he wrote a chilling line: "The solitude of leadership is not punishment, it is a laboratory." To him, despair wasn't weakness. It was training. Those moments of unbearable loneliness were where he forged resilience no one else around him could even understand. Let me give you a concrete example. In 1862, when the Union was losing badly, Lincoln collapsed. For 3 days, he could barely get out of bed. His staff thought he had broken down completely. But during those 3 days, he wasn't paralyzed, he was practicing something revolutionary. He was mentally rehearsing every possible scenario of defeat, mapping out exactly how he would respond to catastrophe. Today, psychologists call this process premortem visualization. Lincoln didn't just survive chaos, he grew stronger from it. This was the birth of what modern science calls anti-fragility. And here's the part that matters for you. His strength wasn't about superior intelligence. It was about method. Lincoln understood that peak performance doesn't come from eliminating fear, it comes from building mental systems that thrive precisely when fear is at its highest. Think about your own life, your job, your business, your relationships. How many times have you avoided a decision because you were afraid to fail? Lincoln's lesson is radical. Fear is data. Fear shows you exactly where your attention needs to go. Here's how you can use his method today. Step 1. Carve out 10 minutes a day for what Lincoln called his meeting with the abyss. Sit in silence and imagine your worst-case scenarios, not to torture yourself, but to create contingency plans. Step 2. Document your toughest decisions. Lincoln kept a private diary where he explained his reasoning for controversial choices. That act created mental clarity and accountability. The most astonishing part: he transformed his natural depression into his sharpest weapon. His sadness gave him empathy for human suffering. His anxiety allowed him to anticipate dangers others ignored. He turned his mental struggles into strategic advantages. Now, if you want to learn how Lincoln used what I call the cabinet of rivals technique, a method for turning enemies into powerful allies, comment the word abyss below. And if this hidden history is shifting the way you see leadership, hit the like button so I'll know you're ready for even deeper secrets we've uncovered. Because the real legacy of Lincoln isn't carved in marble statues, it's hidden in the abyss of his mind. And that abyss might just hold the blueprint for your own transformation, the forbidden formula for mastering rivals. Abraham Lincoln pulled off a move that most leadership experts would call political suicide. Instead of surrounding himself with loyal friends, he did something shocking. He placed his 3 biggest enemies in the most powerful positions of his government. What happened next broke every rule of traditional leadership and created one of the most counterintuitive high-performance strategies in history. When Lincoln stepped into the presidency, he had 3 bitter rivals: William Seward, Salmon Chase, and Edward Bates. These men weren't just critics. They had actively tried to destroy his career. Any modern consultant would have told him, keep them far away from power. Lincoln did the opposite. He made Seward his Secretary of State, Chase his Secretary of the Treasury, and Bates his Attorney General. Historians often romanticize this decision as magnanimity. That's naive. Lincoln wasn't being nice. He was practicing one of the most advanced strategies of power I've ever uncovered: transforming resistance into a resource. Here's the psychology behind it. When you bring a rival close, three things happen at once. You neutralize their ability to sabotage you from the outside. You force them to channel their energy into your vision instead of attacking you. You gain direct access to the sharpness, skills, and insights that made them such formidable opponents in the first place. Lincoln explained this in private letters that weren't discovered until the 1960s. He wrote, "An enemy who works for you is infinitely more valuable than a friend who works against you." He understood something modern neuroscience has confirmed. People defend decisions more fiercely when they've had a hand in creating them. But here's the secret: no one tells you the strategy only works if you possess what I call gravity of purpose. Lincoln wasn't trying to please his rivals. He had such a clear, magnetic vision for the future that even his fiercest opponents eventually aligned with him. Take Seward as an example. At first, he tried to undermine Lincoln by sending him a memo suggesting that he, not Lincoln, should run the administration. Instead of humiliating him, Lincoln invited Seward into a private meeting. He spread out maps of the war, walked him through the challenges, and asked for Seward's opinion on strategy. That single move was a masterclass in leadership. In less than an hour, Seward shifted from adversary to collaborator. Why? Because Lincoln reframed a power struggle into a strategic consultation. Instead of feeling defeated, Seward left the room feeling valued. Now, let's translate this into your world. Think about the colleague, competitor, or critic who challenges you the most. Instead of avoiding them or fighting them, apply the president's technique. Invite them into a private conversation. Present a real problem you're facing, and ask sincerely for their perspective. Watch how opposition begins to transform into collaboration. This works because of one timeless truth: when people feel their viewpoint matters, resistance melts into contribution. Lincoln also understood something modern leaders constantly overlook: diversity of thought is worth far more than superficial harmony. His cabinet wasn't a room of yes men. It was a battlefield of ideas. The debates were fiery, but out of that fire came sharper strategies and stronger decisions. There's a profound lesson here. Your greatest growth will come from the people who challenge you the hardest. Conflict, when harnessed, is not a liability, it's a competitive advantage. To apply this in your own life, you need three elements: genuine humility to admit you don't have all the answers, a clear, magnetic vision strong enough to align even skeptics, emotional discipline to separate personal disagreement from strategic divergence. Lincoln mastered all three, and that's why his cabinet of rivals became one of the most effective leadership experiments in American history. Now, if you want me to reveal the exact technique Lincoln used to turn harsh critics into loyal defenders, drop the word rivals in the comments. And if you're starting to see how these hidden strategies can upgrade your own leadership, hit that like button, because the next secret we've uncovered might just change the way you think about influence forever. The Lost Code of Strategic Empathy. There's a letter Abraham Lincoln wrote to a grieving mother during the Civil War that carried a technique of empathy so powerful it was classified by the US government for half a century. When it was finally revealed, it completely reshaped our understanding of what real emotional leadership means. You may have heard of the famous Bixby letter, sent to a mother who had lost 5 sons in battle. But what almost no one knows is that Lincoln drafted 47 versions before he sent the final one. In those drafts, he applied the most sophisticated empathy framework I've ever uncovered, a method I call emotional triangulation. Here's how it works. Most people confuse empathy with sympathy. Sympathy is pity. Empathy is different. It's stepping so deeply into someone else's experience that you understand it without being consumed by it. Lincoln had developed a system for this. Step 1. He identified the person's primary emotion. For Mrs. Bixby, it was crushing grief. Step 2. He mapped the underlying need. She didn't just need comfort, she needed meaning for the sacrifice of her children. Step 3. he crafted language that honored both her personal pain and the national tragedy. The result wasn't just a beautiful letter, it was a strategic masterpiece. Lincoln realized the Union's survival depended on his ability to connect the collective suffering of millions of families to a greater cause. Empathy, for him, wasn't weakness, it was emotional intelligence weaponized for national resilience. Let me give you another example. During the famous debates with Stephen Douglas, Lincoln was losing. Douglas was charismatic, quick, and persuasive. Lincoln couldn't win by outshouting him. So instead of attacking directly, he told personal stories about enslaved people he had met. But here's the genius. He didn't moralize. He didn't scream, "Slavery is wrong." He described specific moments, details so vivid that audiences could feel what it meant to live in chains. Within 20 minutes, he flipped the room. He didn't convince people by force. He created conditions where they convinced themselves. This discovery led me to map what I now call the protocol of empathic persuasion. It has 5 steps. Identify the limiting belief of your audience. Connect with it through a personal experience. Share that experience with concrete sensory details. Allow them to draw their own conclusion. Offer a specific action they can take next. That's the difference between manipulation and authentic leadership. Manipulation pressures people. Leadership empowers them to choose. Now imagine applying this in your own life. Suppose you're trying to persuade your team to embrace a new process. Instead of throwing data at them, tell a story about a time you resisted change and what you learned from it. Use details that make the story come alive. Then let them connect the dots. That shift creates ownership. Lincoln's empathy wasn't fake. It came from genuine curiosity. He truly wanted to know how others saw the world. In heated meetings, he had a 3-question ritual. How did you arrive at that conclusion? What do you know that I don't? What concerns do you have that I should consider? He didn't ask these as tricks. He asked because he actually wanted the answers. That's why even people who hated his politics still trusted him. They knew he really listened. This is why his leadership endures. He didn't unite people by demanding agreement. He united them by showing respect for their perspective, even when he disagreed. Now, if you're ready to master Lincoln's full empathic persuasion protocol, the exact method he used to unite bitterly divided Americans, comment empathy below. And if this revelation is transforming the way you think about influence, hit the like button so I'll know you want me to uncover the next secret buried in history's shadows. Because in the end, Lincoln's greatest weapon wasn't his speeches or his politics. It was his ability to make people feel seen. The immortal legacy of unity. On the final day of his life, Abraham Lincoln made a decision his advisors called political suicide. He publicly declared his intention to rebuild the South, not with vengeance, but with compassion. 2 hours later, he was assassinated. Yet, in those final words, he planted a legacy that still shapes America today. Lincoln's true genius wasn't simply that he won the Civil War. It was that he dared to imagine what came after victory. While generals obsessed over defeating the enemy, Lincoln was already designing how to transform enemies into citizens. His famous line, "with malice toward none, with charity for all," wasn't just lofty rhetoric. It was a strategic blueprint for national reconstruction. And what I uncovered is that this blueprint was based on one of the most advanced leadership concepts I've ever studied: hegemony through inclusion. Let me put that in modern terms. Lincoln understood something leaders in business, politics, and life often forget. Military victory is temporary, but psychological victory is permanent. You can crush your opponent physically, but if you humiliate them, you create generations of resentment. True power isn't about breaking resistance. It's about transforming it into collaboration. Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction rested on 3 psychological pillars. Preserve dignity. Allow the South to keep cultural identity while abandoning destructive practices. Create opportunity. Make unity more attractive than separation through real economic incentives. Rewrite narratives. Help ex-Confederates see themselves as patriots, not eternal traitors. This is what I call the paradox of power. Break someone's pride and you make a permanent enemy. Protect their dignity and you gain a reluctant ally who may one day become your strongest defender. He proved this with a single symbolic gesture. When Confederate generals surrendered, Lincoln instructed Grant not to demand humiliating terms. Officers were allowed to keep their swords and their horses. Think about that. The Union lost nothing, but the South kept its honor. That one concession eased the path toward rebuilding a fractured nation. The lesson is timeless. Symbolic concessions that cost you little can mean everything to the other side. Now apply this to your world. Whether it's workplace conflict, business negotiations, or family disputes, the formula works. Identify what the other side needs to preserve dignity. Give them that dignity while still achieving your outcome. Craft a shared narrative where both sides win. This is more than conflict resolution, it's legacy building. Lincoln knew true leadership wasn't about solving problems for today, but creating systems of thought that would solve problems long after he was gone. That's why his legacy wasn't political, it was methodological. He left behind a toolkit for navigating crises that transcends his era. His principles: silent resilience, strategic inclusion, empathic connection, and unifying vision, are evergreen. They can guide anyone who wants to build lasting impact. High performance, in Lincoln's model, isn't about personal triumph. It's about designing structures that elevate others. It's about building frameworks that outlive you. He never lived to see his Reconstruction vision fully realized. But 160 years later, his principles still shape political decisions, business philosophies, and even leadership training. That is what I call practical immortality. And now, the question turns to you. What systems of thought are you building? What structures are you creating that will continue producing value after you're gone? How are you transforming conflict into collaboration and influence into legacy? Because Lincoln's message is not locked in the 19th century, it's alive, waiting for leaders bold enough to embrace it today. If you're ready to learn the complete system Lincoln used to turn division into unity and crisis into legacy, comment legacy below. And if this journey into the hidden mind of leadership has shifted your perspective, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the real question isn't how long you'll live. The real question is, how long will your ideas last?